A very warm welcome to all our viewers to this Friends of Europe online conversation, Critical Thinking Live, on the future of citizens and cities in the European deal. And what I mean by the European deal is where we stand currently on matters to do with recovery, the Conference on the Future of Europe, and we also have the new Bauhaus Initiative. All of these things are at their heart about making sure citizens have a voice, have a view, and are engaged in the future of Europe. I have a great pleasure of welcoming three mayors. I have a mayor from Porto, Rennes, and Florence. So diversity in the range of perspective, but also locality. I'll be asking them a range of questions around the importance of recovery and why cities matter. At Friends of Europe, some years ago, we produced a publication called A New Localism as an opportunity to influence what the new commission would do. And here we are 2 years in after the biggest financial and economic crisis and health crisis that's ever hit Europe. And yet we still have an absence of engagement of cities and locality in the policy-making agenda. I first want to warmly welcome Dario. Dario, good to see you and have you with us from Florence, sunny Florence.
Hello.
Hello. Obviously, Florence and your partners across Europe, as a part of this conversation, you're a part of the Eurocities group, if you like. We know from your experience and other mayors that cities have been rarely, if not at all, consulted or engaged in recovery plans. We know some of them are still outstanding, but Italy has got its in. Tell us, how can we reverse the trend of engagement of cities in the EU's recovery plans? Dario, over to you.
Yes, thank you. Good morning. And you are right, Dharmendra. The network-wide consultation we carried last December clearly showed that cities were not successfully involved in the design and the strategic development of the national recovery plans. 70% of the cities responding stated that the consultation process had been insufficient, and only 1 out of 10 cities thought that their contributions had been truly considered in the draft plans. This means that at that stage, most cities did not have an impact on overall strategy of the plans. After a quick follow-up with some of our cities, I'm afraid to confirm that the trend has not changed much over the past 4 months, despite strong efforts from cities and pressure from the Commission. This is not just an important missed opportunity to empower cities to contribute to the sustainable transition Europe needs, but also a risk of a social crisis in our cities. In this respect, the impact of the pandemic and the crisis in our local realities has been very evident. Homelessness continues to rise, unemployment rates are shooting upwards, and local companies are struggling to survive without the support of government schemes. Our public services are vital to protect vulnerable people and limit the spread of the virus, but they are stretched beyond limits. This is the question. And we really hope that the positive signs of the vaccination campaign will continue, although we need to continue to remain vigilant. Besides receiving support to manage the consequences of the crisis, cities are looking for opportunities to contribute to deliver on the green and digital priorities by developing and implementing crucial innovations in these fields. Cities brought forward specific projects on mobility, building renovation, digital innovation, and of course, social cohesion, with an evident potential for systemic impact and a contribution to European priorities. Florence, my city, put forward multiple projects that go in this direction. One example I would like to give you is the
please do.
is the completion of the local tramway system with the construction of the final lines to ensure the best connections across our metropolitan area for a real integrated and sustainable mobility. And this, of course, will also help us to achieve our goal of reduction emission of 55% by 2030. Now, Dharmendra, to respond to your question on what needs to be done to reverse the trend and bring this vision forward, I think we don't need to start from scratch, but rather build on what we have achieved already in the design phase. Being recognized as a strategic partners of the European Union and member states needs to be reinforced and made more effective in the monitoring phase of the implementation of the plans. And I believe that with less time constraint, this is now possible. For this to be effective as Eurocities, we are proposing two things.
Okay.
The first is the establishment of a structured dialogue to monitor the implementation of the plans of the ground. And the second one is the development of city-driven pan-European projects to support the post-COVID recovery. So this is, for us, two main questions.
Dario, thank you. Let's hope, let's see what happens, because that, you know, there's been a lot of discussion about locality. There's been a lot of conversations about how in our major cities, and Florence is a major city of Europe, which houses a lot of the population, and you've been articulate about what some of the issues are. But it'll be good to see, and I'll come back to you on this question, about the fact that we need to see better cross-regional cooperation. One of the things that didn't happen during the crisis, actually, and we know from at least our experience at Friends of Europe, but also from your Eurocities examples, but the reality of your experience is that you are able to cooperate more quickly, more effectively at a city-to-city level than what nation states or member states are able to do. So I think I'll come back to you on that question, but it's really helpful to know those two asks that you have, and let's see what the Commission and others do about that, because at the end of the day, if you are not engaged in the process, it would appear that there will be another missed opportunity, but also potentially the failure of delivery and implementation of recovery. Filipe, I want to turn to you on one of the key issues of recovery, and it's very good to have you here from Porto. Again, another important site of Europe. Filipe, I wanted to touch base with you about the Green Deal and what cities can do and drive forward in achieving the European Green Deal.
Very good. Well, good morning, everyone. It's a big pleasure to be here. I'd like to say hello to all the participants. Well, first of all, I think the European Green Deal is like the EU moonshot. So it's we have several challenges. So becoming climate neutral by 2050, transforming the economy, leaving no one behind. So more or less resets the priorities of the European project and refocus our attention on Europe's cities and urban areas, as you mentioned. So we have from Helsinki to Athens, from Porto to all the way to Prague. Much of the success that the European Green Deal will definitely be determined by European cities. And we have about 75% of the European population living in urban areas. So cities are going to be key in delivering the deal's objectives while ensuring that it's also led to an improvement of quality of life, which is also something that we all ambition. So definitely mayors and city leaders, as Dario was mentioning, can play a double role in this transition. So they can act as an ambassadors for the Green Deal locally, and also representatives of the people's concern and interests at other levels of government. Well, we know that 55% of the CO2 emissions come from cities. We know that 85% of the GDP, European GDP, is produced in cities. So at the same time, cities present both challenges to tackle and also the opportunities to seize. So it's hard to imagine how the EU can become climate neutral in 2050 without them, to be honest. So, and cities are already doing a lot to help to achieve the Green Deal at this moment. In fact, they have waited for the EU to set the targets and are already leading the way on our terms, our own terms. And for instance, 64% of Eurocities members have already committed to become climate neutral by 2050, and 15 cities are prepared to do before then. Helsinki, for example, aims to become carbon neutral by reducing its greenhouse gas emissions by 80% by 2035. Stockholm, for example, aspires to become fossil fuel free by 2040. And Copenhagen climate plan sets out to turn the city carbon neutral by 2025, and this includes through the transition in the energy supply. So while the Nordic cities, let's say, are taking the lead in the race to zero emissions, all cities across Europe offer a pool of innovative local solutions that are dealing with the implications of climate change, including, you can say, fire fighting, so flooding, heat islands, air pollution, health issues. So there is a lot of things that a lot of cities are doing right now. There is, for example, a new approach on water management in Madrid. A sponge city, as Berlin is mentioning, for example, green corridors in Utrecht, rain plan in Paris. So a lot of examples that we have that cities are already doing a lot on adapting and mitigating, so contributing to the Green Deal as we all desire. Porto, of course, to mention some of the things, are also working on carbon neutrality with right now all the municipal energy supply, for example, is already 100% coming from renewable energy. We are working, for example, on one issue that is very important on the Green Deal, that is energy communities, focusing on distributed and renewable energy production and storage. And also, as Dario mentioned, the public transport, sustainable public transport is very, very important as implementing an environmentally friendly and affordable mobility for all. So these are truly very important examples. So to summarize, so European cities are definitely taking a proactive approach to becoming more resilient and to protect their citizens and infrastructures to future shocks, not only this one that we suffered, and cities were very important. So it will be great to see innovative, bold actions supported to a much greater extent at the EU level by working more closely with cities on both policy developments, investment priorities, and I think with that in mind, the European Green Deal stands a much better chance of becoming a reality. And in doing so, and we stress a lot this in the Eurocities, is that cities are the true ambassadors for the future European Green Deal. And they take up their crucial role in bringing the European project much closer to the European people. As we know, it's something that we also been struggling for a long, long time.
Filipe, I mean, it's impressive, the examples you've given, okay? If I may stray a little bit into the question around bringing all of that set of good examples that you have from cities across Europe, okay? I mean, it's fascinating what happens, but also the potential impact if you were to aggregate that experience and make it much more the norm across Europe. Because actually, in terms of the Green Deal and climate change, we know time is running out. There's a real urgency here for us to move much more quickly on this agenda. And the kind of examples you've given are of the cities that we might imagine will be moving forward. And I know that this is a hard question for you to answer. What's your sense of the cities that we do, you know, from the Southern Europe states, for example, and East, that are they in the same place in terms of movement and development on the green agenda as the ones that you've actually outlined to us?
Definitely, I think there is a difference. As I mentioned, there are some cities that are ahead. But as we all work in the Eurocities, and that's truly as the network and how Europe usually works, is that we see each other pushing each other to move forward in a much faster way. So what we have been doing in the Eurocities with all the forums that we have in different themes is that we are all learning in a network and pushing ourselves to a new boundary. So we don't see a problem of having cities at different levels, and I don't see this difference, like for example that south of Europe is not also moving faster in this area. There are very good and a lot of examples coming from many cities, like Dario was mentioning, from southern countries that are also giving a huge contribution to the objectives of the European Green Deal. So different velocities, probably different. So that's why we need to push now the recovery plans and the investments on the European Green Deal in order to make a more cohesive Europe. But definitely we are all pushing for the same agenda.
Filipe, if I may ask, this is a bit of a challenging question, is that you're the chair of Eurocities Environment Forum. Has Mr. Timmermans come and knocked on your door and say, tell us a little bit about how we can achieve the Green Deal? Has there been a connection, between someone who's seen as the Green Czar at the European Commission saying that the business will be different in this new college and this new mandate? Has there been better engagement from, obviously Mr. Timmermans would be great, but has there been a better engagement from the Commission with cities now on this agenda?
We have been able to work closely with Frans Timmermans of the Commission, and all the Commission, of course, is looking. I think it's the European Commission more or less recognized the importance of cities and has tried during these years to work close to cities. We have definitely a problem between, as you mentioned in your first question, between all the levels of government and how the importance of cities should be also brought to the European decision level with the importance that we see cities have and how they can drive this necessity that we have to accelerate to attain the objectives that we all set.
Great, Filipe. Thank you. I'll come back to you momentarily, but I want to move to citizen engagement, and I want to bring Flavie. Flavie, thank you very much for joining us again from Rennes, and it's a real pleasure to have you with us in this discussion and dialogue about citizens in the future of Europe's recovery. I want to turn to you in terms of engagement. One of the things that has, obviously we're fresh 3 weeks away now from the announcement and the launch of the Conference on the Future of Europe, which is about engagement, which is about making sure there is more of a bottom-up approach to Europe and policy making. Flavie, tell me, what are the good examples, what are the innovative examples of citizen engagement that you can share with us that you are developing in Rennes?
Thanks, Damandra. First of all, thank you, Friends of Europe, and thank you, Eurocities, to allow me to take part in this exchange of views. We must use any opportunity to explain again and again how important cities and citizens are for Europe and for Europe's recovery. You are right, Damandra. Cities are involving more and more their citizens in the definition and the development of their public policies. In Rennes, local democracy is a transversal policy driven by the mayor. It takes the form of what we call a citizen factory, in French, fabrique citoyenne. Mm-hmm. It's a large-scale participatory approach applied to all the sectoral policies when it's possible. This participatory approach aims to broaden the space for citizen dialogue and to facilitate the participation and contribution of inhabitants to local public policy. It takes different forms, as called from projects, animation of groups, debates, and discussions around the competence of the cities and that have tangible effects on daily life of inhabitants. Our participatory approach is based on a charter of local democracy, including 5 main values: ethics, equality, transparency, respect, and continuous improvement. It supposes the commitment of all actors and stakeholders, citizens, associations, local actors, as well as politicians and civil servants. The charter allows to harmonize the work of the various bodies supporting local democracy, as the advisory committees on equality, on health, on laicity, the Citizens Council, the user committees for swimming pool, libraries, etc. Let me tell you about one of our flagship action, the participatory budget. It's a matter of giving the inhabitants the possibility of proposing particular investment projects, but also of giving them a key role to decide on the general orientation of the budget of the city. In practical terms, 5% of the investment budget of Rennes, meaning more than 3 million euros each year, it's dedicated to this participatory budget. Projects are submitted by residents, associations, or communities. Their feasibility is studied by the service of the city in order to be sure that, mainly legally, there is no objection. Then the inhabitants vote for the projects they want to be achieved. It's a very strong commitment from city leaders. Projects must be implemented, and they must be implemented rapidly. Year after year, we observe a growing number of voters who feel more and more involved. They better understand the competence of the city and the necessary timing from the idea to the effective political action. Various policies have been fed by proposals from citizens. I give you 3 examples. The first, the future urban planning of Rennes has been collectively imagined with citizens in a project called Rennes 2030, in French, Rennes 2030. The second, digital communication tools were co-created with residents. And European citizenship was boosted within Labo Europe, co-managed by the city and the associations. The Citizen Factory is an approach to boost democracy, but it's also a lever for the training of citizens. This training of citizens must be considered from an early age. That is why we are now proposing a new participatory budget for children. This will be put in place in schools to contribute to their citizenship education and also in extracurricular or non-formal education spaces.
Sounds excellent. This is, all very good examples. And just imagine if some or most of that was basically mainstreamed across Europe. Imagine, citizen education, citizen and civic engagement from the school to your old age is exactly what's required and how we should move forward. But let me come back to all of you with a couple of more questions around recovery, and in particular the kind of investment that was required in a relationship with citizens, but cities, that creates a different kind of deal or a social contract. Dario, I want to come back to you. This month we've had the EU Social Summit. It's been talking about, addressing social inequalities, etc. From your perspective, you're someone who's also, like Friends of Europe, and this year we're focusing all our efforts on having a big conversation about the need for a new social contract, or not rather resetting the social contract, but actually a new social contract, because the changes that have happened to us as societies, the biggest debt ever, the biggest health crisis ever, and the fact that mostly taxpayers' money has fundamentally underwritten societies across the board. So we need a different look at the relationship between public, private, and voluntary sector, but also with the citizen. Can you tell a little bit about this, the approach you're taking, but also the new pact for cities?
So, well, ensuring a just recovery based on sustainable and inclusive labor markets, as you told us, I think is the greatest challenge of our times. I applaud the initiative of the Portuguese presidency to hold such a successful European Union Social Summit last 7 May, and to have invited for the first time cities to be part of the debates, which is an important aspect of this new strategy. And back to the social summit, Eurocities held the first ever city social summit where we as city leaders reaffirmed our full support for the European pillar of social rights and inclusive labor market recovery. Now, about 75% of Europe's population lives in cities, as you know. We are responsible for implementing more than half of the European Union's employment and social policies. And 13 of the 20 principles of the European Pillar of Social Rights are within the competence of cities. We are also in charge of 2/3 of the total public social investment. And it is impossible to imagine how we can create sustainable and inclusive labor markets in Europe by 2030 without cities in the driving seat. Cities have already proven their commitment to the pillar implementation with real actions on the ground. We listen to many examples, for example, many examples on Green Deal. We have done so through the Eurocities campaign, Inclusive Cities for All, over the last 2 years by putting the principles of the pillar into action at local level with social investments from our municipal budgets. And this resulted in many concrete actions, such as including social clauses in public procurement, or setting up a local pact for employment, mobilize thousands of companies to offer jobs and on-the-job training, supporting the local social economy and many other initiatives. Cities like Rome, Amsterdam, Berlin could give you many concrete examples. And we cities are truly committed to working together with the national governments and European institutions to put inclusive employment first in Europe's recovery. We are ready to fulfill our role, but in turn, we expect you to engage us as key partners in the European agenda for the recovery. We reminded this aspect to European leaders. Finally, as mentioned previously, cities have not been properly consulted in the development of national recovery plans. And we are now proposing the establishment of a more structured dialogue that would address also the European semester. In this context, we believe that cities, national and the European Union leaders should work side by side to make sure recovery is about investing in people's skills, investing in childcare, education and training infrastructure. And this is what will get Europe out of the crisis, to build stronger political ownership and momentum around this. We have proposed a summit every year, not one shot, but every year to monitor the progress on social rights and employment trends and to find joint European solutions to common challenges faced by our people. We can build back better, a stronger social Europe if and only if we work together and join forces.
Dario, you make some really important points. And it strikes me, you know, all of us know this, that our experience of the health crisis, the pandemic, and now soon to become the large, you know, one of the biggest economic crises in terms of unemployment and job losses, etc. It's all going to be felt at the local level. People didn't experience the health crisis nationally. They didn't experience, they're not experiencing their debt, etc., and so forth nationally. It's locality, it's at the local level. They saw systems either working or not working at a local level. And national government had very little capability to turn things around. And one would have thought that given the fact that we are likely to have more crises in the future of this nature, this is not going to go away. There isn't a turning back the clock, and also we'll have climate challenges on our heels. That you'd have thought after this experience that we'd see a very different deal for cities as we move forward. And so, thank you for sharing that. Let's hope, because one would think that after this huge shock, politicians and politics of the EU would change and make cities matter, because it has been at the local level that citizens have felt the pain and the sense of disruption but dismay at what's happened to society. I want to turn back to Philip. Philip, let's talk about the notion of the Green Deal. And I know that just like what we've just heard from Dario, the sense of alliance making across cities, because it occurs to me from what all of you have said, there are fantastic examples of practice. You are much like, and I mean cities, are much like the small to medium enterprises of Europe. Small to medium enterprises are the bulwark of the economy of Europe. Cities are the bulwark of society of Europe, across Europe. And you think you have to get that sorted in your head and not ignore you. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing in terms of the Mayor's Alliance for the European Green Deal, because it sounds as if that's where you are kind of really aligning and I suppose hopefully shifting the power base. Filipe, over to you.
Well, very good to your analogy with the PMEs, with the small and medium enterprise was very good. So that's definitely something that we believe and we have been stressing throughout this talk, that the importance, and that's why we launched the Mayor Alliance that's led by Eurocities in partnership with the European Climate Foundation. The idea is to bring together the committed mayors to convey the powerful message towards a sustainable and inclusive transition, and making visible that mayors are taking the lead in delivering it, as we mentioned. It's about bringing together the different elements, the sustainability, the environment, the social, the economy, as mutually reinforcing in one vision for the cities, as the ones that can really help Europe to move faster and forward. As you mentioned, I always stress this sense of urgency that we have on these subjects. We cannot forget it. So by capitalizing on cities' ambitions to be the driver of sustainable transition, promoting Mayor's action message on a resilient recovery within the public debate, let's say, we hope to inspire others to act and increase the understanding that at the EU level that the contribution made locally is crucial. This will help to increase the political visibility of our investment choices, including regarding, for example, the national recovery plans. It will also increase the public awareness and engagement in a sustainable future for Europe. So where as Dario mentioned, where social equity and climate neutrality goes hand in hand. It's the only way to move. So there is a lot that is being doing also. Well, there are other projects that the EU is leading. Also, the 100 climate neutral cities, for example, it's a great initiative. Also, that's owned by the Commission. So there is a lot that Commission is also trying to promote together with cities. And of course, in Eurocities, we fully support this kind of efforts because we truly believe that they drive change and by working in partnership across all levels of government is something that we have to promote. And when the EU is making this, we truly support it, because this is the kind of contracts that we have between mayors, the European Commission, and the national governments and national authorities that we jointly have the responsibility to work on. It's a good example. But there are other good examples, as we have been seeing, like the Green City Accord or the Living in EU movement, where we see city authorities shaping the digital future in collaboration with the EU policymakers. So by developing a framework and scaling up effectively the digital solutions across Europe. So there are many good examples that we have been seeing, or initiatives that the EU is being promoting. Like they understand, as I mentioned, I think there is a common understanding that cities are very important, although this differences in different types of levels is not, as we have heard before. It's very difficult because it's related with the power and the sense of power and losing power, and this we all know that's very, very difficult to move to a new and different way of doing and moving our projects forward. So I would say that one of the objectives as the mayor in the Mayor's Alliance is to ensure that we don't miss this unprecedented opportunity. So we have really time frame to drive the European Green Deal locally through investments at local level. So the proposal for city-driven pan-European projects that Eurocities President, Mayor of Florence, Dario just mentioned goes exactly in this direction. When we work together at pan-European level, we can mobilize the critical mass to drive the transition. I'm a fan of the European way of doing things. We lead the world in many aspects. Indeed. And definitely we have here, if we continue and understand the importance of doing this in a pan-European level, it's very important. So the investments should be channeled towards transformative projects and capacity building in cities and urban areas. And there is a real opportunity to deliver benefits for local communities and make it more sustainable for Europe. So when we have cities on board and their contribution is recognized, I think Europe's next generation will be able to benefit from cities. We'll be living in a much healthier, much thriving, much more inclusive urban areas, and we will definitely be in a much more resilient Europe, and with the best quality of life as we all.
Let's hope, Filipe, because it sounds that at this stage, some people haven't learned the lesson this far, even though we've been through such a phenomenal crisis. And it occurs to me that, you had the launch recently of the Conference on the Future of Europe. You've also got the Climate Pact, which is a very significant investment. We're also involved in helping deliver that. And we know that at the heart of that is about the dialogue with citizens. And if you, just very briefly, because I may not get a chance to come back to you, Filipe, is that what's your sense of the level of engagement on the Conference of Europe from people in Porto and Portugal more widely and elsewhere? Is that, there is this talk of having national digital platforms for engagement. Is it working? Do you seeing people from your constituency engaging? And then just very briefly associated with that, as you say, cities are the accelerators of the future, if you can bring them together in a meaningful way. And it occurs to me that it's cities that are going to actually have to fundamentally transform themselves in the context of the digital revolution that's taking place, but also what will happen in terms of health and climate. So say very briefly, touch upon what your experience has been so far in terms of engagement on the Conference of Europe and the pace of rapid change we're going to be going through.
Well, rapidly, I would say that I would like to have a much higher engagement on the discussion of the European project, let's say. But I think, as I mentioned before, it's a responsibility that if we all understand that by working with cities as the level of government that is more close to the citizens, we can really express ourselves what is the European project to the European people. And I think this is something that we have been stressing a lot. And we know that most of the times the European project gets stuck on national level, and it's transformed as a national view and not an European view. And cities have not done this. We have always worked together as network and promoting the European project. I believe, as I think your question was meant, is that we should increase the level of participation. We should move, for example, to our economy as Europe should be much together as, for example, the United States is. It's still very difficult to develop a small and medium enterprise, as you mentioned, to develop a European project, to develop European business, as, for example, in other places of the world. So we have still a lot to do. Okay. But I think the European project has a lot to give us if we are able to transform Europe in that sense. And cities have this vision. Cities work together in that sense, as I mentioned before.
Filipe, thank you very much. On the notion of the European project and, you know, the issues of Euroscepticism, especially in the context of what we've gone through. Flavie, can I turn to you? I've been really impressed, and we've been really impressed with your the Labo Europe project, where you're really addressing the issue of Euroscepticism and putting citizens more in touch with Europe. Tell us a little bit about, how come this has been successful in Rennes? What have you been doing that's really given a different sense of engagement with the idea of Europe? So tell us a little bit about the Labo Europe project, and why it's successful, and perhaps how we can roll it out.
I'm proud to say that the Labo Europe has been a success in terms of raising awareness about Europe among a large number of citizens. It made possible to bring together citizens who are very different from each other, not initially connecting to European issues, and then to involve them at the heart of the same dynamic. It's essential, and it's indeed the duty of European cities to commit themselves to making inhabitants aware of their effective identity as European citizens. All European cities should use some type of collective animation process. Rennes has been facilitating and promoting a great variety of actions within the Labo Europe in the past years. And we have considered that the dissemination of this good practice was as important as the practices themselves. We want to contribute at our scale to a collective momentum that we would like to be as large as Europe. The Labo Europe will continue, but we also want to go further in terms of European citizenship. To do this, we are initiating right now a process in Rennes in order to promote a European Citizens Initiative based on our dialogue with citizens from our city. This possibility of proposing a European Citizens Initiative when you are a plain citizen must be further promoted and used by European cities. All European cities should get involved in raising awareness of European citizenship, and all cities could do more by boosting European citizens' initiatives. If European Union also wishes in the future to be part of a boost democracy process, a participatory process for and with citizens, a process of consultation and involvement of the inhabitants to concretely develop European public policies, it should do so with European cities. Why? Because first, of all they are, we are volunteer for that. We want to take a bigger and more important part in Europe. Eurocities is a perfect illustration of this. Then, if Europe wants to be a participatory approach and reinforced democracy, its institutions should rely on cities because they have experience of these methods of consultation and participation, because they are the closest to citizens, because they would therefore be the appropriate link to bring citizens and Europe together. Raising awareness of European citizenship is important, essential, but it will not be enough to relaunch Europe, to bring the European project up to date, to renew European democracy. A Europe without involved European citizens does not make sense. It will not deliver its initial message in the long term. It will not transmit its primary political will. We should be to unite, federate, protect, wait with all those who do it. If Europe considers that consultation, involvement, and participation of its citizens is the basis of a large-scale and sustainable European Union, it must bring the cities around the table. Thank you.
Thank you, Flavie. And it's clear, I mean, from the statistics alone, you're doing something very, very special, obviously, because in the 2014 elections, there was 45% of the population voting. In 2019, it went up to 54% in Rennes, which was much higher than the national average in France of 50%, and the EU across the board average was 51%. So clearly in Rennes, there's something that you're doing with your citizens that's inspiring them to engage with Europe differently. And let's hope we can learn the lessons of Rennes for other cities across Europe. Thank you. And I will now finally, because I'm running out of time, is to go back to Dario. Dario, and perhaps each of you may want to say something, but you don't have to. But I want to conclude with you, Dario, around the Conference on the Future of Europe. And how do you make sure that locality or urban policy or urban matters really get into the EU mindset more, into EU thinking more? Because isn't that what the Conference on the Future of Europe is all about? Dario, over to you. Final words.
Thank you, Dharmendra. So I would like to start reminding that last November, the informal European Council meeting of national ministers on urban matters adopted the new Leipzig Charter, which is a strategic document which acknowledges the transformative power of cities for the common good. The Charter builds on the joint work by cities, the European and national governments, with a particular attention to the lessons learned from the urban agenda for the European Union. And the mayors strongly endorsed the Charter, as you know, particularly its strong calls to the empowerment of cities. And I'm completely agree with what Flavie and Filipe told us now. Secondly, the adequate financial means, and finally, a good urban governance. And last but not least, to provide a seat at the table for cities at both national and EU level, because this is the point. And another point is that involvement of cities in European decision-making on policies and funding that are impacting urban areas must be clearly reinforced, because we are the best ambassadors of Green Deal, as Filipe reminded us. On the ground, the ambassadors of the Green Deal on the ground, and the European needs as a partners in order to build back better the places where the majority of the European population lives, in other terms, cities. And as we have said many times already, to make this happen, it would be key that the European Commission improves the internal coordination of its action on and for cities, as well as its political leadership. We need a more ambitious and consistent vision on cities, I think. A consistent vision on cities at the European level. And Europe needs to get smart and go local in order to get us all out of this challenging context and build a new sustainable and fair society. That's because, Dharmendra, your organizations, your network, Friends of Europe and Eurocities, representing both civil societies and local institutions, have to work together strongly, more and more, because now we have probably the huge opportunity in our European history. You mentioned this crisis like a huge shock, but with a huge shock, we have a huge opportunity. And now we must use this opportunity all together, and mayors of Europe are ready to help.
Excellent, good to hear. My colleagues, thank you all three for being with us. I'm running and run out of time, unfortunately, but it's been a real great pleasure to engage each of you. What would be good to hear, actually, like I haven't got time for this now, but obviously to bring you back again about what are your big ideas for the Conference on the Future of Europe? You know, we know that next spring they'll be, coming forward with the recommendations. It'll be good to see what happens between now and then, but we hope to engage you again in this dialogue on the Conference on the Future of Europe. But also, as you know, Friends of Europe, we've worked with yourselves over the past 2 or 3 years, and we've been pushing the new localism agenda. And let's hope that in the coming months that people, especially the political mindsets within the EU, change and actually understand the beauty, the magic and the power of a new localism and localism at Europe to really foster the European project into the future. Thank you all very much. I hope that you can also engage with us in our State of Europe Roundtable. We have our annual event in October, on October the 14th, where we bring together decision makers, policymakers from across Europe and the world, and our discussion is going to be framed completely around the notion of the need for a social contract for Europe. So I hope that we can welcome some of you there to that discussion. And we also want to welcome you in this ongoing dialogue on the Conference on the Future of Europe. And actually, what does it mean for us to genuinely have a more of a bottom-up Europe? Thank you all for being with me here, and take care. And for those of you who are viewing, please keep an eye on our website for future events online. We have a number of things coming up from for all your tastes and interests, and where in terms of locality also. But it leaves me nothing further to say, but also to just thank you, Flavie, Filipe, and Dario, for being with us in this Critical Thinking Live discussion about citizens, cities, and the recovery of Europe. Thank you all very much for being with us. Mind your distance and take care. Bye-bye.